So, in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, Amen. Veni Sancte Spiritus, Repletivorum cora fidelium, et tui amoris ignes eniam accende, emite spiritum tuum creavuntur,
et renovavis faciam tere.
Oremus Deus cora fidelium, Sancti Spiritus, udis rationem decubisti, et nobis in iodem spiritu recta sapere, et eius semper consolatione gaudere, per Christum Dominum nostrum.
Amen.
Sede sapientiae,
Ora pro
nomine
nobis.
Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. So before we start, just want to arrange some quizzes, because we're getting a little bit too far into everything. We're way ahead. Because I think it's something. Right back. I have to get the study guide in order to do this. Do I have it? I think I do. Oh, there it is. All right. So you had a quiz already in.
We've done 1 through 25 here. So
1 through 25. Okay. All right. Let me write this stuff down. So we are up to where does this only go to? So that means that, say, let's say 1 would be 26 to 18.
You mean 26 to 38, Your Excellency?
Oh. What the heck? What happened with this? That says 27 and this page says 13.
I think you gave us a non-complete version of study guide and then gave us a full one, Your Excellency.
All right, so 26 to 38, that's quite a bit though. But this page though, how could you have a page that does that? Stupid printer again. Or the stupid computer, but not the person that is operating it. All right. Oh, this is all mixed up. All right, so 26 to, is that too much though? All right, let's say 26 to 33. That would be, let's see, the next time I have you is Tuesday. All right, so that would be Tuesday 28. Then 34, and let's see if I can find the rest of it. It's quite a bit. Okay, 34 to 39. I'll just give you 2 next week. So that would be, we have November 1st coming up. So 28, 29 is Wednesday. 30, 31st November 1st must be Saturday. So let's say, well, Halloween, that would be a good day for a, but I have you on Fridays. No, I don't. So that would be the 30th then. So that would be Thursday, 30th, a week from today. 34 to 39. And then 40, now let's see if I can find the rest of this. I only go up to 41. Is that all I gave you? It's too bad. Well, at least you have those. All right, so Tuesday, 28, Thursday, 30th. Tuesday, 28 is 26 to 33, and Thursday is 34 to 39. All right. I don't know what happened to it. All right. So then you're not all completely overwhelmed by the exam. But then I just might stop at a certain point. Look at how far we are in the book. So we still have a lot of academic year to go. So anyway, I just don't want to push it so much that you're overwhelmed. Well, we're on page 662, Naturalism and Semi-Naturalism. The following outlooks belong to absolute naturalism. A, the Kantian theory of faith. B, the theory held by many liberal Protestants. And C, the theory of the modernism. So, the Kantian theory of faith, on the one hand, there is his speculative agnosticism. See that you just don't know from the point of view of reason whether God exists or not. According to Kant, speculative or theoretical reason cannot know with certitude what exists beyond the phenomenal order. So we know that. So he denies metaphysics. On the other hand, there is his position concerning the autonomy of the will and of practical reason, which imposes the categorical imperative or the moral law upon itself. And so he believes in God, but it's a purely internal thing and is not based on reason at all. And not based on, he would reject the whole idea of motives of credibility. So that's based on this twofold foundation, we can only have moral faith by which we believe the postulates of practical reason deduced from the categorical imperative, namely the existence of free will, the future life, and God, the one who justly rewards. So he's a necessity of morality. That's Kant. This moral faith has subjectively sufficient certitude, although it is objectively insufficient. Its formal motive is not the authority of God who reveals, but rather the exigencies of practical reason, inasmuch as the categorical imperative, that is the moral law as it exists in your head, would not be preserved if these postulates were rejected. See, so it's a necessity of public morality and personal morality, the existence of God. That's all it is. B, the theory of the liberal Protestants like Schleiermacher, Ritschl, Sabatier, and Harnack reduces the faith to a natural religious sentiment and the act of faith to religious experience, which is livelier in Christianity than in other religions. Hence, the credibilia are mysteries of Christianity inasmuch as it appears to us to be conformed to the aspirations and exigencies of our religious sentiment. See, so dogma depends on religious sentiment, which is exactly what we're seeing now. The first Protestants rejected the infallible proposition of divine truth by the Church, which proposition is a necessary condition of faith. It's conditio sine qua non, because otherwise you would not know what, in fact, God has taught. That's why Christ established a church and gave it the assistance of the Holy Ghost. He will teach you all things, etc. Because, well, look at Protestantism. It's a joke from the point of view of unity of faith. Who knows what God reveals? So you have to have a divinely assisted teacher in order to know infallibly what to believe. All right, so the proposition of the church is we'll see, is a conditio sine qua non of the act of faith. Now, liberal Protestants reject not only the necessary condition, but the formal motive of faith, namely the authority of God who reveals, conceiving of religious faith as being something that is, simply speaking, natural. So you have some idea of God, something like that. The theory of the modernists, like the liberal Protestants, the modernists reduce faith to a religious sentiment and the act of faith to religious experience. So you should probably know this already. The foundation of this theory is twofold: agnosticism and immanentism, as is shown in the encyclical Pascendi. In virtue of the modernists' agnosticism, they hold that human reason can know with certitude only phenomena and phenomenal laws. So they take Kant's philosophy there. Hence, even the religious phenomena of Catholicism must be explained not through God's supernatural intervention, but rather in accordance with the development, evolutionem, of the religious sentiment immanent within us. So all of the revelation takes place interiorly. However, the credibility of the mysteries is had inasmuch as something unknown appears to be hidden in the history of the Church, and this unknown is the best thing for us and responds to the requirements of our religious awareness. This is all from Pascendi. However, this ultimately leads to the denial of the immutability and absolute truth of dogmas, which we are seeing now. The German bishops just recently said in their I think their synodal meetings that that they intend to bless all couples that love each other. Isn't that nice? And so the Vatican said, that really goes against fiducia, fiducia, the ones that said we're blessing couples but not as couples. That's where it is. I mean, just you'll see they'll get away with it, and then others will do it as well, and then it just becomes part of the whole experience. The faith is subject to science. You could do that for the sadomasochists. I don't see why they're excluded. I don't even know if you know what sadomasochist. It's people who take sexual pleasure in being hurt. So they treat each other with whips and also it's really weird. Yes, you can look it up. But I mean, it's a sexual attraction, And hey, if why close the door on them? We should have parades for those people. Same thing. It's against nature. So if you're going to, exit from nature, well, where do you stop? I looked on I don't know if it's still there, but on Wikipedia, back in the 2018, I did an article on that. There was something like 30-some what they call sexual disorders. All sorts of attractions that are really, really odd. One is to be attracted to excrement. They may have taken it down by now. I'd like to see if they did, but there's something about 30 of them listed by psychologists. So imagine that'd be quite a parade. Anyway, so that's it leads to the change of dogmas. Nay, faith is subject to science and philosophy, inasmuch as value of the concepts of dogmatic formulas is determined by philosophy. However, according to the modernists, this value is only phenomenal in character and not ontological. All right, so semi-rationalists differ from naturalists inasmuch as they admit at least the eternal fact of supernatural revelation. However, they diminish the supernaturality of faith on the side of both the subject and the object. So, the Pelagians said, supposing eternal external revelation, internal grace is not necessary for one to believe, as is necessary for salvation. So the act of faith for the Pelagian is not something moved by grace. One only needs natural knowledge of the signs of revelation and natural goodwill. So that was a very early heresy. It was Pelagius was an English priest. And St. Augustine railed against the Pelagians. The semi-Pelagians said that internal grace is not required, at least for the beginning of faith, but is given, however, so that one may believe more easily and more firmly. The theory of the semi-rationalists, especially that of Georg Hermes, according to semi-rationalists, the mysteries of the Christian faith can be demonstrated by reason, at least after revelation. This way, the essential supernaturality of faith is destroyed. Faith would only be modally supernatural as regards to the first proposition of the object. So they're gone now. Nobody's interested in them anymore. So we'll skip to... If these positions are presupposed, the external motives of credibility, such as miracles, are only speculatively probable, then the formal motive of faith is not the authority of God who reveals, but a kind of exigency of practical reason. Go down to the theory of the semi-immanentists. Certain Catholic philosophers like Maurice Blondel and Lucien Labertonnière, who defend the primacy of action and of practical reason, and hence they were allies, so to speak, of Bergson. And hence also, so something is not true unless it's active. See, it's not true for you unless it's put into action. That's kind of basically what it is. Hence also defended the primacy of the method of immanence, can be called semi-immanentists. Immanence means the modernist idea of religious experience. Failing to take due care concerning these matters, they seem to hold that our nature makes a true demand for the supernatural order, as you need God. Indeed, they concede to the agnostics that by itself speculative reason cannot defend its own ontological value. According to them, if we remove the requirements asserted by human action, our speculative knowledge remains notional and subjective and can only posit the problem of action and direct action, whereas action itself is what reaches objective reality. So when you put things into practice, that's when you really believe them. The truth is nothing other than the real adequation of the mind and life. See, the correct notion of truth is adequation of the mind and the object. So a book, so you see a book, that's a book. That's truth. But here it's mind and life. In other words, your daily activity. That's the proof of truth. In other words, something is true if you're living it, which obviously leads to all kinds of problems, especially change of dogma, inasmuch as a judgment is conformed to the requirements of our life. So you see, I have to get a divorce and all the requirements of your life could be very, very bizarre, let's say. Hence, and in this we can see their semi-immanentism. Religion, indeed every supernatural religion, must be proposed as an aid, postulated, that means demanded, in some way intrinsically on the basis of the exigencies of our action. So action is primary, so religion is secondary. For by virtue of the autonomy of reason, man wishes to accept nothing extrinsically unless it is required for the perfect development of his faculties. See, so the idea is that the human mind is completely independent, and nothing can be forced upon it, so to speak, like supernatural faith. That's the way they see it. Immanentism says that Catholicism arises from the development of the religious sentiment that is immanent in our nature, within our nature. These philosophers say that Catholicism is revealed by God, but it corresponds to the exigencies of our nature. Thus they draw close to Bionism, for something owed to our nature is neither gratuitous nor supernatural. As discussed above, on account of their speculative agnosticism, these philosophers do not admit the ontological value of miracles, but instead only admit their symbolic value. Who knows if they're true or not, but it's nice to believe in them. Moreover, in other respects, they excessively extol the value of internal motives, as though the mysteries of Christianity were demanded by our nature. Finally, they hold that the divine origin of Christianity becomes certain only in the Christian experience itself, under the aid of grace, and that divine faith is identified with this experience. So faith is action. This is not lacking in some affinity with modernism. It certainly does. It does not sufficiently preserve the formal motive of faith, namely the authority of God who reveals, nor the rational knowability of the fact of revelation. Hence, this theory is far too akin to semi-naturalism. So these are the principal heterodox notions of faith. So then we come to the Catholic notion of faith. Right, from the perspective of the object, the formal object quod, the objective formal motive, quo, it is, where the revelation is uncreated, etc. So he's going, I never read those outlines of what they're going to do. I just go to what they're going to do. I never read introductions either. I think they're boring. It's true, they're boring. Who needs the introduction? So the explanation of the act of faith from the perspective of the object. So the object of faith can be considered in two ways. One, the object that quod, which you should know, and the formal object quo, that by which something is believed. So you should. Formal object quod is that which is per se primo, achieved by the faculty. Does that ring bells? All right. The formal object quo is that by which, that medium, I might say, by which the faculty achieves the formal object quod. So, for example, the if I get this right now, the formal object quod of the eye is color. The quo is light. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. Always go back to those examples because that clears up things. This is fairly abstract. So we're going to see what the quod and the quo is of faith. The object that is believed, either material or formal. The material object of faith is everything that can be believed. So material object, going back to philosophy, is everything that material object of eyesight is everything that's colored. So it's very broad, right? So everything revealed by God. this material object is subdivided into the per se object of faith, namely everything revealed that cannot be known without revelation, and the preambles of faith, namely those revealed things that can be known even without revelation, but are prerequisites for knowing the supernatural mysteries, namely God's existence and the other such natural truths of religion that can be demonstratively proven. So all of the first part of the De Deo Uno is exactly that, existence of God and his attributes that can be known by reason. Those are known as the preambles of faith. All right. Hence, the preambles of faith pertain to faith per accidens and not per se, because they are available to reason. Okay. However, the per se object of faith is either primary and formal or secondary. The primary and formal object of faith is God sub ratione deitatis. See, that God under the ratio of his divinity, from the perspective of the deity, that is, according to his intimate life. In other words, it is the first truth in the order of existence, as exceeding the natural knowledge of any intellect that could ever be created. So God could not create an intellect that could comprehend him. When I say comprehend, that means totally understand him. He could not. That would be another God. As exceeding the natural knowledge of any intellect that could ever be created. From this perspective, God can be known by a created intellect through supernatural revelation alone. This object is called formal because, as St. Thomas says, nothing falls under faith except as ordered to God, just as the object of medicine is health, for the art of medicine considers nothing except as ordered to health. Excuse me. However, the secondary per se object of faith includes all those things outside of God's intimate life that can be known by revelation alone, like the mysteries of the Incarnation, the Redemption, grace, the Eucharist, the other sacraments, the supernatural virtues, and the beatific vision. All these things proceed from God's intimate life and are ordered to it. So there's that distinction, therefore. So you have the breakdown there, the material object of faith. It can be an object per se, or the preambles of faith. We saw that. The object per se, the primary and formal, is God sub ratione deitatis, that is, from the formal perspective of his intimate life. Secondary, the supernatural mysteries that are ordered to God. See, so, for example, you study in moral theology, that's considered theology, a study of God, that is, human actions as they are ordered to God. And preambles of faith, natural truths of religion. The formal object quo, or formal motive of faith, is the authority of God who reveals. See, so we recite the creed based on the authority of God revealing, and we believe those things because God has told us, just as you believe Fox News when it tells you that somebody got shot or something like that. That's the formal motive, is the credibility of Fox News. That they're not going to deceive you. See, so you believe it. Yeah, it's true. Somebody got shot today. There's plenty of people that will get shot today, especially in Chicago. So anyway, there's always a formal motive in every belief. As I said, in the supermarket, you have making all these acts of faith with a formal motive. When you see the news, you're in an act of faith. You read a book, you have a history book. Well, I guess all these things took place. I mean, I guess George Washington existed. Did we see him? No. Maybe he's a fable. So, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Aristotle. How do we know those things? Except by acts of faith. I mean, there's so much. I mean, that's natural faith, obviously. But there's so much that your knowledge is probably mostly based on natural faith. Most of it. Very few things you actually experience. Did the sun rise this morning? Well, yes, the sun is out. That's an experience. But the so much of it is based on natural faith. So faith is not let's say an unusual thing or in some way extraordinary thing for the intellect. It happens many times every day. But supernatural faith is, in a way, extraordinary, but there's the idea of believing something that somebody told you is not extraordinary. So the question is, did God reveal himself? This is what we're going to talk about in this course. And if so, how do we know that he revealed himself? And did he establish a church? And, how do we know that? And et cetera, et cetera. That's what you're going to go through. All right. Now, the term authority contains two things: trustworthiness and the knowledge required for teaching. See, so if you have a witness in court, for example, they might be very trustworthy, but upon examination, you find out that they don't have knowledge of what went on. Well, I was about 100 feet away when I saw this. You might find out in cross-examination. See, they might be truthful, but they may not have sufficient knowledge. See, so they, is this the person that murdered somebody? Well, I was 100 feet away. I think so. See, that's all the defense needs. See, then I rest my case. I mean, if that's your only witness, forget it. See, because that would not remove reasonable doubt. So you have to have those two things: truthfulness and the knowledge of what you're talking about. See, so those are the conditions of an act of natural faith and also of supernatural faith. Now, divine faith is said to be that by which we believe in God. Therefore, the motive of divine faith is the trustworthiness of God who reveals. The major premise is clear, for this is what distinguishes the assent of faith from the assent of experience, whether of science or of opinion. The motive of the assent of faith is the trustworthiness of one who speaks to us, whereas the motive of the assent of experience is sensible evidence. So if you experience something with your senses, you don't have to believe it. The motive of scientific assent is the truth of the principle from which a given scientific conclusion is drawn. So through reasoning, you reason from principles. The motive of the understanding of principles is their intellectual self-evidence. See, that you start with things that are evident, and then you conclude from things that are evident to something that is not known. That's reasoning. Finally, the motive of opinion is a probable reason on account of which we assent with uncertainty and fear of error. See, that's opinion in the strict sense, is that there's always a fear of error, that there's a reason to believe, a reason to hold the idea, but there are contrary reasons which have weight. It's an opinion. Right? So, hence it cannot rest on any other motive than the trustworthiness of one testifying to it. By contrast, faith is a certain form of adherence to a non-evident object, known from someone's testimony. Hence, it cannot rest on any other motive than the trustworthiness of the one testifying, namely that trustworthiness by which the witness speaks the truth and cannot deceive. So if somebody's a liar, what do they say? Liar, liar, pants on fire? Yeah. So that's how you destroy the testimony of someone in court, is to show that that they're lying or that they're mistaken. And that ruins the motive of credibility. See, that they don't have the sufficient knowledge to know, see, or that they're just deceivers. Thus I believe what my Father tells me. Hence, the motive of divine faith is the trustworthiness of God who speaks to us through revelation. The second part of the proposition is proven as follows. In order for faith to be certain, it must rest upon an indubitable motive. Now, the trustworthiness of a speaker is not indubitable unless it connotes knowledge required in the speaker. So again, the courtroom, if the lady says, well, I'm not sure, I think he's the one, then forget it. You have to acquit. It's not enough to dispel lack of certitude. Therefore, the trustworthiness of God who reveals is the formal motive of infallible and divine faith only if it connotes the infallible wisdom of God. See, so God obviously can neither deceive, that means he's not a liar, or be deceived, that means he cannot make a mistake. He cannot be led into error himself. So that's the part of the act of faith. It's God can neither deceive nor be deceived. Namely, inasmuch as God can neither deceive nor be deceived. Indeed, it does not suffice that the witness could not deceive out of wickedness. It's not sufficient that the witness is a perfectly upstanding person who would not lie. That's not sufficient. Beyond this, it is also required that he cannot deceive even out of ignorance, and it is indeed the case that God himself cannot be deceived in his knowledge. You can be deceived out of prejudice, just you don't like these type of people or something like that, or you don't like Democrats or whatever. These points suffice for the formal motive of faith. It is the trustworthiness of God who speaks, connoting infallibility. In a word, it can be expressed thus: the authority of God who reveals. All right. I don't think we need to do the objection. Turning the page. The first doubt: does revelation itself, as an uncreated and free action of God who reveals, pertain to the formal motive of faith, or is it only a necessary condition for it? All right, so you see a lot of, in the footnotes there, you see Domingo Banez. He is one of the great Thomists. His works are in the library. He was the one that developed the Thomist theory of actual grace. His enemy, so to speak, is Molina. So it's Banez versus Molina. Then Vincenzo Gotti. Gotti was also a Thomist. But even the Thomists had some disagreements. But that's normal and natural. And as I said, controversy drives research. So it's not such a bad thing. Just should be conducted in a nice way, but it's not always done that way. So St. Thomas, the Thomists, and here they all are: Capriolus, Cajetan, John of St. Thomas, the Salmanticenses, that means the Dominicans of the Carmelites, of Salamanca in Spain. Gonet, that's the lineup, and even Suarez and De Lugo. This is a lineup with the Thomists that you'll never see again. This is Mazzella S.J., Cardinal Billot S.J., and others. believe that active revelation belongs to the motive of faith. Scotus and the Scotists, on the contrary, with St. Alphonsus Liguori and certain others, say that active revelation is only a necessary condition for faith. The first opinion, as Camillus Mazzella notes, seems to be more conformed to the First Vatican Council's definition of faith as the virtue by which we believe on account of the authority of God who reveals. He did a De Ecclesia, Mazzella did a very good De Ecclesia, if ever you want to. As I said, the battlefield today is De Ecclesia. So, in your spare time reading, it's all in Latin. In your spare time reading, it would be good to read all of those tracts on the Ecclesia. Most of them are going to say, in other words, most of it will be what we're saying here. But they will have other things. Francelin also another Jesuit, wrote an excellent De Ecclesia. He was the principal theologian at the First Vatican Council, Cardinal Francelin. He was Austrian. And he has a Latin tome like that on De Ecclesia. But there's many others. Schultes, too, has a good De Ecclesia. So they're all in the library. But, Bouix, Bouix, he wrote De Papa and De Episcopo. And those are very good, too. And Mozzarella, that's in the library. There's a lot written on the church. And that's where the principal battle is. So to be well read, you would want to go through all of those, take notes of things. As I said, many of it would be repeating what's here in this book, but much of it is not. They go into speculation. Like Francelin says, the church must always have the ability to legally elect a successor of Peter. That's in Francelin. Number 13. And you can see from the other course that the succession is, Petrine succession is an absolute necessity for the Catholic Church, for its pedigree, to show itself as the true Church of Christ. So, I mean, the Saint Augustine says it. Saint Irenaeus, it's where were you born? In other words, where is your succession? And that's what distinguishes the heretical sect from the Catholic Church. So that's why it's so important. So the first opinion, as seems to be more, we said that, definition of faith as the virtue by which we believe on account of the authority of God who reveals. For these words offer an explanation for the formal motive of faith without making any distinction. See, that is referring to the council. Nay, a definition does not include the prerequisite conditions for the thing in question, but rather includes only those things that pertain to the very essence of the thing. So definitions don't get into the explanations. That's essentially what it is. They are relatively short. This is it. So nonetheless, according to Vacant, now who is Vacant? He was somebody who did this work, Études théologiques sur la Constitution du Concile Vatican. So he did a theological study on the constitutions of Vatican I. That's also a very good book. Pretty sure it's in the library. If not, I'm sure it's probably available now like everything else is, but that's why you should learn French. Second ecclesiastical language. French write a lot of stuff, and they write in their own language usually. They don't like Latin, typically. Some do. Cardinal Billot is French, but so anyway, a definition. Nonetheless, according to Vacant, the council did not resolve this question and did not condemn the other opinion. So it didn't get into didn't want to say one way or the other on the two opinions. Okay. That's typical. That might have extended the council for a whole month or something like that while they all get up and it may not be something. Something has to be definable. That is, it has to be contained at least implicitly in Revelation. See, so some things just remain theological opinions and cannot go any further because they are deduced from revelation, and they have to be at least implicitly. That is the something that is, well, some say virtually if it comes from the very nature of the thing. For example, Christ is both God and man, but all men have intellects, so therefore Christ had an intellect. You see, that would be definable, because you're just taking it from the very nature of man. You see, but you can't do if you have the intervention of reason from, say, something natural, then it could be a certain theological conclusion, which is very high. In other words, there's no doubt about it, but that's different from something that's defined. And something has to be definable. So there was always a big discussion whether Mary Mediatrix of all graces was definable or not, and Mary as co-redemptrix, whether that's definable or not. I think Pius XII decided he didn't want to define it. See, that's if there's any kind of doubt as to whether it can be defined or not, you say no. So any kind of serious doubt, you would have to have proof that, and those things are difficult because sacred scripture does not say that much about the Blessed Virgin Mary. There's St. Luke, and then she appears again in Cana, then she appears at the foot of the cross, she appears at when our Lord is preaching, but the last thing she says is at Cana, do whatever he tells you to do. That's the last we heard from her. So there's some things might just remain theological, and with certitude, but theological nonetheless. So when the church defines, it is very careful to define. So Thomists defend their position on the basis of sacred scripture and theological reasoning. Indeed, sacred scripture does not distinguish the motive and necessary condition of faith, but rather says that the divine testimony is the reason why we believe, which is pretty clear. For example, 1 John, if we receive the testimony of men, the testimony of God is greater. He that believeth in the Son of God hath the testimony of God in himself. He that believeth not the Son maketh him a liar, because he believeth not in the testimony which God hath testified of his Son. I mean, you can't get more clear than that as far as I'm concerned. But I have a greater testimony than that of John, and the Father himself, who hath sent me, hath given testimony of me. Neither have you heard his voice at any time, nor seen his shape. I don't think this is from the Douay. And you have not his word abiding in you, for whom he hath sent him you believe not. Right, so and various others. Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Yona, because flesh and blood hath not revealed it to thee, but my Father who is in heaven. St. Paul, that your faith might not stand on the wisdom of men, but on the power of God. But to us God hath revealed them by his Spirit, for the Spirit searcheth all things, yea, the deep things of God. And then Galatians, for neither did I receive it of man, nor did I learn it, but by the revelation of Jesus Christ. Theological reasoning also proves that active revelation pertains to the formal motive of faith as its constitutive form. It's what makes it to be what it is. This proof is had from the distinction between a motive and a condition. A motive or cause positively influences its effect. For example, by its action, fire burns wood. So you apply, a match or whatever to fire, and that is a true causation. See, it's because there's a flow of being from the fire to the wood. Right? Flow of being is key for a cause. By contrast, a condition neither positively moves nor influences, but rather is necessary so that the cause may have influence, and only applies the already in act cause to the patient. that is that which is acted upon, for example, by touching the fire to the wood. See, so the application of the fire to the wood is an occasional cause, but the real cause is the fire. Hence, the argument runs as follows: that which formally constitutes the formal character of a testimony, rendering authority itself formally motivating, itself pertains to the formal motive and is not only a condition applying a cause to its effect. See, so in other words, by the analogy, it does the authority of God set your intellect on fire with faith, or is it simply an application of truths to your intellect? In other words, that's sort of what it is. In other words, is it merely a proposition? Now, active revelation formally constitutes the formal character of the testimony and renders the divine authority formally moving, for divine authority that does not speak does not formally bear witness, nor is it something that moves hearers to belief. Therefore, in other words, just some obscure divine authority that does not speak, well, that's no good. Therefore, a single formal motive of faith is the first truth, God, that means actually bearing witness, that is, the authority of God actually speaking. Now, notice he doesn't give the SCOTUS side. See, so nobody pays attention to them. So, well, it's kind of true, you know. So, but that's important. So the second doubt is important too. So, all right. Today is October. Okay. Is it 23rd or 24th?
23rd.
23rd. Okay. All right. So then you have. Let me put that. What I wrote down. Tell me what the, because I have to put it in the book.
26 to 33, right?
26 to 33,
On
Tuesday,
and then
and then
34 to 39.
34,
Thursday.
39 on Thursday. I don't know what I did with the note. I'll put it in the book. Okay. Wonderful. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, amen. Subtuum praesidium confugimus Sancta Dei genitrix nostris deprecationis et despicias in